In this video, I want to answer the question, what is groupthink? In the 1970s, social psychologist Irving Janis studied the way that groups make decisions. What he found was that the process that the group takes often acts to inhibit properly exploring all of the options. People find disagreement uncomfortable, that inhibits proper discussion of alternatives, and the group will start to seek agreement before it's properly ready to. As the group approaches consensus, dissenting voices will increasingly be rejected or, equally likely, self-censored. People will refrain from saying what they think they ought to say for fear of creating disagreement and therefore setting the group back. And therein lies the problem. Janis said that concurrence-seeking becomes so dominant in a cohesive group that it tends to override realistic appraisal of alternative courses of action. When a group falls prey to groupthink, decisions are increasingly based on what we all know. Uncomfortable, inconvenient, dissenting knowledge is ruled out. And yet often it's those inconvenient facts which ought to be leading us to a different and better decision. If individuals feel inhibited from challenging the consensus, then important and relative information and ideas fail to get introduced. It's also worth noting that the group tends to have a higher collective confidence in the decision that it made than individuals would have had in that decision had they taken it individually. What this means is that groups can tend to endorse higher risk options than individuals might have been willing to endorse on their own. This frightening characteristic of groupthink, the group moving to a more and more risky position, with individuals feeling inhibited from challenging that, is known as risky shift, and has in the past led to some disastrous decisions from groups prey to groupthink. And it's certainly the case that groups are more likely to fall prey to groupthink the more cohesive they are and the less diverse they are. Another characteristic we need to be aware of in groupthink is the impact of particular individuals who are particularly authoritative, influential, or charismatic. Whether that comes about because of their leadership role or their technical expertise or their personality, these individuals can often anchor the group by stating their opinion and inhibiting through that charisma, that influence, that authority, inhibiting other members of the group from properly expressing their views, particularly if they run counter to the views of that individual, whilst others who support their views or want to be seen to support the individual will pump up their views and therefore again trigger a risky shift towards a more extreme version of that individual's views. And of course, once a group starts to approach a decision, it can be psychologically harder for individuals to change their mind, particularly if they have expressed a view already that is in support of that position, because then they would lose face. All of this combines to create the conditions for bad decision making, which are exacerbated when time is at a premium and the group doesn't feel that it's got enough time to properly discuss every aspect of the situation. The response therefore has to be strong facilitation, mindful of a process which is going to overcome the risk of groupthink, and giving the group plenty of time to discuss its decision before calling for either a consensus or a vote, or for the individual in charge to make the decision based on the discussion. If you want to move towards better group decisions, there are a number of steps that you can take, And the first is to start with a diverse team. The more homogeneous your team is, the more we all share the same background, the same expertise, the same technical knowledge, then the easier it is to agree with one another. So introduce one or two individuals from a very different background, and make sure that in the facilitation of the group discussion, those individuals are allowed to ask the awkward, inconvenient, sometimes obvious questions that force the experts to justify their position. Second, never let the experts, the leaders, or the charismatic individuals state their position early, because then you run the risk of other people polarizing around that position, either in opposition to somebody that they always disagree with, or in support of somebody whose favour they want to gain, or whose opinion they trust uncritically. Third, before you even start the process of looking for options, let alone making a decision, start with a round robin which gets as much of the evidence, the facts, the opinions, the knowledge on the table. That way, those inconvenient truths are there in the discussion from the start. You're less likely to find resistance to them being rediscussed than you would to having them introduced at a later stage in the discussion. Next, make sure you discuss all of the options and their pros and cons before calling on people to express an opinion. If you must take a vote, the best way to do it is by secret ballot, because then it makes it easier for people to change their mind if you have a further discussion based on the disagreement that the secret ballot shows up. If, on the other hand, I've raised my hand and publicly stated my position, I'm going to find it much harder psychologically to change my mind. Fifth, a good technique is to appoint someone in the group to act as devil's advocate. Whatever position is expressed, whatever ideas are put forward, whatever argument is made for something, it is the job of the devil's advocate to pick holes in it and to take account of you, to put it to the test. That way, the devil's advocate is someone who is appointed and has permission to do that, and therefore feels freer to make the case against the points that are being made, and it therefore also makes it easier for other people to jump on the devil's advocate bandwagon and to support in challenging a point of view which the group may be cohering around, but which one or two individuals recognise as being flawed. Once a particular position or option starts to emerge as a likely candidate for consensus, focus the whole group on looking for flaws, looking for problems, looking for risks, looking for consequences. It may be that all of these flaws and risks and consequences are acceptable, but before the group reaches a decision, it must document its understanding of all of them so that it can make an informed choice. Next is a great way to minimise the risk of groupthink by dividing the group up into small groups and having those small groups discuss options. Clearly, if one option is by far the most compelling, it's likely that all of the groups will come up with that option and you'll have some evidence to back that idea up. But if one option is not the most compelling, it's likely the different groups will come up with different options to prefer. And because you've already got established groups supporting those rather than individuals, those groups will be able to argue far more confidently against one another than would be the case for a single individual feeling they have to argue against a whole group. My eighth idea is to invite outsiders into an established group to challenge the thinking, to put new ideas into the group, and because they aren't part of the group, they will feel more confident to speak out because they don't have the same quality of relationship to put at risk if they stand against the group in making the decision. Number 9 is the important idea of giving every member of the group access to the raw data rather than to processed information. PowerPoint and similar slides are dangerous because what they do is present a digested view of a subset of the information. They summarise, and in summarising, they are rejecting some information and presenting other information in a particular way, and that can introduce bias. If every member of the team has access to the raw data, each member of the team can think for themselves about which data is relevant and which to ignore, and how to present that data and analyze that data for themselves. And my final requirement to avoid groupthink is to facilitate in a positive manner. Make sure that every member of the group is able to be heard. Make sure you hear from every member of the group. Make sure every member of the group gets the respect they deserve and the recognition that they're there on merit. They deserve their place in that group. Because if you don't do that, then individuals can get sidelined and their ideas will get wasted. I have no doubt that the best way to make a difficult, complex and important decision is with a group. But you will only make a good decision if you can avoid the risk of groupthink and the enhanced risk of risky shift. Next time you need to facilitate a group decision, put in place as many of my ideas for mitigating the risk of groupthink as you can. Please do give us a thumbs up if you like this video. We produce loads of great free and paid content for the onlinepmcourses.com community, so please do visit our website and please support this YouTube channel by subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss any of that content, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.